Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl Podcast, a 3-time award-winning show that aims to motivate and inspire you while increasing the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. If you're passionate about adventure, challenge and learning from women who have overcome obstacles and achieved remarkable things, then this is the podcast for you. Every Tuesday at 7 a.m, new episodes go live featuring incredible women who share their stories, insights and tips to help you achieve your dreams and goals. You can support the Tough Girl mission by signing up as a patron. Visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Keep listening until the very end as I share more information about what's going on with me with Tough Girl Challenges, give shout outs and recommend other Tough Girl Podcast episodes. More information can be found at toughgirlchallenges.com.
I'm Sophie Etheridge. I'm an ultramarathon swimmer and also an adaptive athlete, and I'm based in Cambridgeshire in the UK.
Fantastic. And this is not the first time that we have spoken. So we previously spoke with you. It seems forever ago, but your episode came out August 23rd, 2022. And you shared more about being a disabled long distance open water swimmer and being the founder of, how do you say this? ADOS? ADOS, which stands for?
Adaptive and Disabled Open Water Swimmers.
And so during that episode, you shared more about how you got into swimming, doing your first 5K at 11, being disqualified from your first swimming gala, going to university. You shared more about the accident, being diagnosed with complex regional pain syndrome. You talked more about, well, to be honest, like some, sad topic, being away from your family, experiencing bullying, feeling quite lost for about 5 years. But then you also shared more about getting back into the water, falling in love with swimming again, wanting to become a swimming coach, getting your level 2 open water swimming qualification, finding yourself again really after 8 years, the campaigning and the incredible work that you've been doing for disabled swimmers, making new friends, the magical moments when it comes to swimming. You shared more about your 2-way Windermere to WW in 2020 and your plans as well for swimming the English Channel. So we covered a lot in that episode, which is almost like it sets the scene for everything. But I wanted to sort of take you back to the end of 2022, beginning of 2023. What was happening at that point?
So in 2022, I did an English Channel relay swim with the Hastings Voluntary Lifeguards. And while I was on that boat, was having chats with our official observer, who's the person that, observes and sort of makes note of everything that's going on the boat and in the water and that sort of stuff, so that they document it officially for the Marathon Swimming Federation. We chatted about, and I explained I was umming and ahhing about looking into doing a solo English Channel swim, and basically asked her questions as in, I would like in 3 years' time to come back and do the English Channel, because it's so expensive to do the swim and I'd need to train a lot and all this sort of thing. And then about 2-3 months later, I was giving a talk at the Swimming Teachers Association conference where I'm an ambassador, and got talking to someone called Mike Goody, who's a veteran and became a leg amputee. And I was explaining how one of the things I'd really like to do would be complete the original Triple Crown, because no one with a disability has done it before, and very few females at the time had done it as well. That's swimming the English Channel, the Bristol Channel and the North Channel solo, which is obviously a huge undertaking. And my first one was going to be hopefully the English Channel. At that point, the CEO of the STA walked down the stairs, and Mike knew him. I didn't know him very well. And basically said, I've got this idea, Dave, like it involves some money, but it could be quite good for us, I think. And Dave basically said, write it all down, send it to me, and we'll see what happens. And then within 2 weeks later, I was swimming the English Channel the following year.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that.
It was a bit unexpected.
But also meant to happen, meant to be.
That's how I look at it now. It was clearly meant to happen when it did.
Mentally, like psychologically, this is obviously something that you really, thought about, dreamed about, something you really wanted to get involved in. When that became a reality and it's like, I've got this opportunity, did that change anything for you in terms of right, I really need to, I don't know, get plans in place, start up in my training. I need to work with a coach. I need to do things differently. What sort of happened in that time period before taking on the swim?
So I kind of think it was a bit of all of them, really. I mean, you have to have like a medical and have to do a qualification swim, and there's lots of processes that you have to go through to be able to actually swim the English Channel. So I'd sort of got a checklist, if you like. And one of the things that I decided sort of in December of 2022 was that the best thing for me to do was going to be to learn as much about swimming the English Channel solo as possible in the next year before my swim. And that's basically exactly what I did. I trained in a similar way to that I'd trained for my two-way Windermere swim, but more intensive. I think I had 4 or 5 weekend trips to the beach because I'm obviously in Cambridgeshire, so I'm not near the sea. And also went on a swim camp in Wales, which I'd never done before by myself. I'd never really travelled anywhere on my own. And the year as a whole, the journey of it was absolutely incredible. And it's totally changed me as a person and totally changed my life. And I'm incredibly fortunate to have had that journey in the way that I had it. I had lots of different opportunities come about. So I went to a conference about English Channel swimming. So, yeah, it was a very quick year that took a very long time, if that makes sense, in that I had a lot to do, and I was very aware that I had a lot to do in actually not very long. So I announced, I believe it was at the beginning of January, that I was going to be doing the solo swim that year. So, and the swim I was doing was towards the end of August. So actually I only really had 8 months sort of to train properly. And it was a lot to do in 8 months. And literally my life became about swimming the English Channel and raising awareness for disabled swimmers. So the STA who sponsored me were running a campaign. They do a different like community campaign each year. And for 2023, it was called Starlight, and it was about shining a light on disability swimming. They just brought out a new disability swimming teachers qualification, and they were providing that qualification for free for swimming teachers to upskill swimming teachers to become more specialist in working with people with disabilities and kids with disabilities to try and get more disabled people in the water, basically. So it was backwards and forwards between me and the STA and working out what publicity stuff I could do whilst also having to train. So it was, yeah, it was a bit overwhelming at first, I think, but it was also incredibly exciting. It was something, I mean, the swim was first put to me when I was 16. So when we spoke about the relay channel swim I did when I was younger, I think we spoke about it last time. And I was seasick the whole way there, the whole way back, didn't see France, didn't swim. And afterwards, a friend said to me, well, if you can't do it because you get seasick, you'll just have to come back and do it solo one day. And that always kind of stuck, but it never seemed, especially after my accident, that was going to become a reality. And all of a sudden, it was going to happen. And I went into my training, and generally into year 2023, there was no doubt over I was going to go and attempt to swim the English Channel. I never said I was going to go and attempt the English Channel. I was going to go and swim the English Channel. So there was never any doubt. And I think words and language is quite important. And psychologically, for me, saying I was going to go and do it meant I was going to go and do it, which is what I did. So yeah, it was a lot in a year.
Oh, a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
And can you just remind people, with your disability, when you're swimming, you don't use your legs, do you? Is that right?
No. So, I mean, most long distance swimmers, you don't use your legs very much anyway. You tend to use them more for balance. But for me, I just can't use them. I don't keep my legs really. There's no strength in them and it just causes me more pain. So for doing a long distance swim, you don't want to cause yourself extra pain by kicking your legs. The difficulty I had during my actual English Channel swim, which I hadn't experienced before because Wyndham is still water, was it meant that every time I fed in the English Channel, normally you tread water, or most people do, or they lay on their back or whatever, and then kick their legs. For me, obviously, I couldn't do that. So every single time I fed, I was having to feed twice because the current would push me back past the boat. So I was then having to let go of the feed bottle, which was on a bit of string, catch up with the boat, and then be throwing the bottle again to finish the feed, and then catch up with the boat again. So it added quite a lot to my actual swim. So although a lot of people don't use their legs, it's not the same as kicking your legs in the swimming pool if you're doing like short distance where you tend, whenever you watch sprinters, they always tend to make quite a bit of splash and that sort of thing. People use it to balance them in terms of when they breathe, but also it's sort of a long, slow, steady kick rather than a quick little one, if that makes sense. So it's about conserving energy, but still having the power from the legs.
Take us to the English Channel swim, because you certainly had a few challenges on that swim. Do you want to talk us through it?
I mean, I knew a lot of the challenges that I was going to face. We'd worked on them, and I'd worked really hard throughout the year, as I said, to learn as much as I could, and used as much of that, of what I'd learned, to help me in the swim. I was very fortunate with the crew that I had. So my pilot was actually my pilot when I was 16, and the previous year for my relay as well. And Mia, who had been my observer the previous year in 2022, was also on the boat crew. And then my own personal crew, I had my sister who had done Windermere two-way and obviously knows me and knows my swimming. My friend Camilla, who was more of an acquaintance than a friend at the time, but she'd done a relay channel swim a couple of weeks before me. And we'd swum together a few times, so she was going to be my support swimmer if I needed one. And then Mike, who was the person that helped me with getting the funding in the STA, and he was there more to represent the STA, but also for me, he's sort of been through the same process of becoming disabled and going from really active to becoming disabled, and then going on to doing ridiculous challenges. Like I think he's done an Ironman and things. And so in some ways that was motivation to show me that if he could do it, why couldn't I? The biggest challenge I ended up having was that I went on a spring tide. So because I was so late booking my slot, normally you book sort of 2-3 years in advance at least. So I basically got the last slot that was available, which was a spring tide, which means it's a bigger tide. So it pushes you further and up and down the channel each time the tide changes. So yeah, there were quite a few challenges for me, but I knew that I'd prepared myself as best as I could. It's a bit pot luck when you're swimming the English Channel because you never know what it's going to do. You can predict it to a point, like using weather and that sort of thing, but you don't know what's going to happen. So it's almost like taking a leap of faith. But I'll never forget when I got off the boat. So you meet them at Dover Harbour Marina, and then you drive round on the boat to where you start. You have to get in the water, swim to shore, and get out and clear the water, and then you can start. So then you get back in and swim back to the boat, and then back with the boat, basically. For me, the biggest challenges and fears was getting out of the water. So I knew that it wasn't going to be easy, and we wouldn't know where I was starting and where I was finishing. So it's not like I knew if it was going to be sandy or rocky or a slipway or anything like that. It was a real sort of panic moment for me. Was I going to complete the swim, but then not actually be able to get out of the water, and therefore it wouldn't count?
Can I just clarify? So people can't help you with this. When you get driven round, so you're still on like the English coastline,
Yeah.
you have to swim to the shore. And then what do you do? Do you have to do you crawl out, or can you push yourself up? Can you stand unaided?
Yeah, so I can stand unaided, and I did a lot of work in 2023 alongside the swimming. I did a lot of strength training, and it, as much as anything, was confidence building in that my legs are there even when I can't feel them properly. So it was almost learning to trust my legs and trust that they'll be there to support me even if I can't feel that they're there to support me, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
it's a bit weird, but more than anything, it was just the pain of standing up. So at the beginning of the swim, I wasn't too bad, and I was able to crawl out and then stand up and then get back in. And that wasn't a problem. It was the end of the swim that I was concerned about, because when I'm really tired, there was no way I can't stand up when I'm really tired or really sore. I've done lots of exercise or something. So it was the getting out afterwards without being able to have anyone to touch or help me to get out of the water and clear the water.
And do you have to stand up at the end? Or can you just clear the water? Like, can you?
Yeah, you've just got to clear the water so you can crawl out, which is what I ended up having to do. It was the longest crawl of my life, but yeah, that's what I had to do. I couldn't stand up for about, I think it was about 3 days unaided, because the swim just took so much out of me in the end.
Yeah.
Um, I was expecting to do it in, well, we took enough food and nutrition for 24 hours, but I didn't think that I would last more than 20 in the water. But I was aiming for about 18, 19 hours, and it took quite a lot longer than that. So, yeah, getting out was a fear more than the rest of the swim, I think.
Yeah. Let's talk about the swim. So you're starting off, you've done all this training, you've got great people around you, you've got your nutrition around you. Oh, 30
Yeah.
miles, 48 kilometers. You start off swimming mentally. Sort of talk us through, I suppose, maybe just like the high points, the low points, if you got in flow, if you didn't got in flow, or were you just in flow all the time?
No, so my plan was for the first 2 hours to swim hard, to try and make as much progress forwards as I could before the tide started to change. But at the beginning of the swim, I had issues with my swimming hat, which I'd never had issues before, that were really bugging me. So I changed swimming hat. I also threw up my first two feeds. So it was a bit like, well, if I'm going to throw up every single feed, there's no way I'm going to swim the channel. So there was a bit of an anxious moment round then. What it turned out was that the bottle wasn't quite done up. So I was actually drinking seawater.
Oh,
So some of the seawater had got into like my hot chocolate and my blackcurrant, and it just made me be sick, basically. Once we'd sorted that and I'd swapped swim hat, I was absolutely fine. And I got into my rhythm and my flow and was quite enjoying it. I quite enjoy night swimming. I started at just gone midnight. I made reasonable progress, sort of early morning. So sort of by 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. I'd been pushed up quite a long way up the channel, but then we were expecting that. And normally when you swim the channel, you do a wiggly line, like an S shape. And if that was the peak of it, and then I went down and you sort of nip into Cap Grenade, then I was sort of in the perfect position. And I actually hit the midpoint just before lunchtime. I think it was around midday. And up until then, I was quite happy and having a nice day out, to be honest. It sounds a bit daft putting it like that, but we had a beautiful sunrise that I obviously got to swim through. The water was reasonably calm. It was about 17 degrees. I knew that I could swim through a full night because I did that for my Windermere 2A, more or less. So as the sun came up, it was a beautiful sunny day. My crew was sunbathing on the top deck of the boat and everyone was having a bit of a nice day out, really. And everything was kind of going to plan. I hit the midway buoy and I then swam sideways for 7 hours. I didn't know I was swimming sideways for 7 hours, thankfully, but I just wasn't making any progress forwards at all. And where the tide changes every 6 hours, of course, it meant I got pushed back up the channel again. So in the swim as a whole ended up taking 29 hours and 4 minutes. I didn't question it till the sun had started to set. So I'd swum through the night and then through the day, and the sun was starting to set. And we'd worked it out time wise and hour wise, and I should have been on French soil by the time of the sunset. And I could see that France was still miles and miles away. and you sort of get told not to look forwards to see how far you've got to go because it can be really demotivating. And I'd set myself a list of questions that if I asked, my crew weren't allowed to answer. So I was playing in my head, are we nearly there yet? But trying not to become that really annoying toddler asking crew, are we nearly there yet? When I knew that they'd been told not to tell me if I was nearly there. So it really became more of a mental swim than it was physical. I started to see the effect and feel the effects of being submerged in the water after about 17, 18 hours. And my lips swelled up and I was getting a bit of a sore throat when it started getting dark. So at the second night, which sounds bonkers, I was struggling to take nutrition in because my throat was just so sore from the abrasion from the salt. It got a bit more complicated as the sun set. It doesn't get colder, but it feels colder because you don't have the sun on your back anymore. I wasn't shivering, but I was on that sort of verge between being fine and shivering. And it's very, very rare for me to shiver in open water, especially in sort of 17, 18 degrees. But it was just where the sun, which had been lovely all day on my back, I got a hell of a suntan from it. All of a sudden, I didn't have that extra little bit of warmth from the sun and did start to feel the cold. And obviously, at that time, I was also getting quite tired. And it was, to me, that was when my swim started, because it was then that the challenges came where the wind had picked up, the swell had increased, the boat was really walking backwards and forwards and nearly hitting me and landed on top of me. And it was, yeah, it had its moment, its scary moments where I was like, I'm not sure about this now. I don't know. It wasn't very comfortable, but I somehow managed to push through that. One of the funniest moments, looking back at it, is the funniest moment. At the time, it wasn't at all funny. It was quite scary. It was pitch black at this point, and whenever I was swimming, there was at least one of my crew members had their eyes on me the whole time. And at this particular point, it was Camilla that was watching me. And all of a sudden, I was breathing on one side, looking at the boat. So I was only breathing to the one side, really. And all of a sudden, the boat was on the other side of me. And apparently, I was facing the wrong way and swimming back to England. I've no idea how. I still to this day don't know how. We've not managed to work out how or what happened or quite, yeah, we don't know. I was just all of a sudden on the other side of the boat facing the other way and heading back to England. But the best bit was that Camilla went, no, go that way, and was pointing apparently. But of course it was pitch black. So she was pointing directions at me and I couldn't see her. So it was like, no, go that way, no, to the right, no, to the left. It was, yeah, a bit of a comedy act, to be honest. And in the end, it was just, Camilla, I can't see where you're pointing. It's dark. Which way am I meant to be going? And she was like, turn 180 degrees. And I was like, oh, okay. It was quite a scary moment, but looking back on it, it was utterly ridiculous. How it happened, we've no idea. But yeah, I decided about, I mean, it must have been 22 hours into my swim, I was going to turn around and swim back to England in the middle of the night. So it definitely had its moments. The first time I asked, so one of my rules was not to ask how far I had to go or roughly how long I had to go or how many hours I'd been in the water for. So they were sort of the three main things that I decided not to have answered if I asked them. Simply because if I felt like I'd been in the water for like 16 hours and actually I'd only been in for 10, it was going to make me mentally feel like, well, this just isn't going to happen then, is it? Because I already felt like I'd swum for much further and longer than I already had. And it just mentally for me that I just couldn't get my head around that. So it was better for me to just say, don't answer it. If I ask the question, don't answer. But actually, the first time I asked them how long I'd been swimming for and how long I'd been going for, apparently I basically gave them a death stare. And it was Camilla and Mike that I did it to. And I just stopped dead all of a sudden and went, how long have I been swimming for? And they said, they were like, we can't not tell her. The look she's giving us, we need to tell her. And they told me I'd been in for about 20 hours, which was obviously the maximum I thought I was going to be in for. And again, I could still see France was quite a long way off. But for some unknown reason, as you do when you're in the middle of the channel in the pitch black, I said, right, I'll go to 24 hours. And they would just, and I'll never forget it, Mike went, you're nuts. And I was like, to me, saying I'll go to 24 hours made sense because in my head, 24 hours is a full day, and there's not many people that can say they've swum for a full day. So even if I didn't complete the swim, I'd done something that not many people had done before. So if that sort of makes sense, it made sense to me at the time.
It does. And I was just thinking as well, it might have also been comforting to know when, because if you're in your head thinking, oh, maybe I've been going 16, 17 hours, and then it's like, no, you've been swimming for 20 hours. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm doing
Yeah.
really well. Like, yeah, like, I don't know, you've gone so far beyond what you thought you could achieve. It's almost like,
Yeah.
yeah, like what is an extra couple of hours? And
It was a really strange feeling and sort of for the next hour, because I fed every hour and then every 45 minutes after 16 hours. And it was, by that point, it really was a mental game. I'm pretty sure my arms would have just kept going round. I'd had Camilla had to get in a couple of times with me and swim, and they swim. You can have a sports swimmer swim with you, and they swim slightly behind you, so they're not allowed to go in front of you. But it made me, I knew she couldn't overtake me, so it made me swim faster, so it increased my stroke rate. But other than that, sort of my arms just sort of kept going. So it really was at that point a mental swim rather than anything physical. And for the next 45 minutes, I was like, right, okay, so if I can go to 24 hours, it's only 4 hours more. If I've already done 20, I can do 4 hours more. Like, that's nothing. So to me, it made sense. And it was just they didn't tell me when I got to 24 hours. And I didn't ask again. So I didn't realise how long I'd been swimming for, really. I mean, ended up setting 3 world records, but I didn't know that and had no idea till I got back on the boat and was like, oh, okay.
so we'll talk about the 3 world records, the finish, getting to France. Like, was it like your hand just scraped on the ground and you were like, oh, like, what was that reaching France like?
So it was a bit strange in that, so you have like your main pilot boat, and then most pilot boats also have a little rib boat, like the little tube boats. So depending on where you land, obviously depends how far how close the boat can come to the shore. And it was still dark when I was starting to land. And I was actually reading through my blog last night, looking for something. And it reminded me that Mia was the person that had told me the rib boat was coming into the water, going to be put in the water. And I didn't really understand why. And I was like, oh, okay. I just sort of got on with it. And then Lance was in the little rib boat next to me, and we'd left the pilot boat behind. And I'd planned every scenario we could think of with Mike on how I was going to get out. So he was going to swim in towing my crutches, and he was going to land before me and put them on the beach so that I could then just pick them up without actually him touching me and things like that. But the only scenario we hadn't planned for was the one I was currently in. So I did on the rib boat, because it's so small, there was only Lance who was the pilot in it. And I didn't know if he'd got my crutches. I didn't know if he'd got my dryer. Just didn't know. So all of a sudden, it felt like hours I was swimming next to him. It wasn't. I think it was only about half an hour. But I didn't know if I was actually going to be able to land. it was, yeah, I didn't realise I landed in Calais. I didn't know I was in Calais, but Calais has a notoriously long, shallow beach. So it goes on, the sand goes on forever and ever and ever. And I mean forever. And so Lance was every now and again checking using his oar that he'd take, his paddle he'd taken with him, to see if it was shallow enough for him to touch the ground with it so that he could tell how far we had to go. And eventually, obviously, it did touch the ground, and he took the boat in and then got out and stood on the sand waiting for me to land. And I swam as far as I could and then beached myself. But it was strange because it was all of a sudden my hand was on something that wasn't water. And when you've only felt water for that long, the sand was almost scratchy on my hand. And I put my hand down and I realised I was practically laying on a beach basically, but I was still in shallow water. And I looked at where Lance was standing, and I'll never forget it. It probably wasn't actually as far as I think it was, but I could see him standing on the sand, not in the water. And I was like, there's no way I can get that far. So I had to crawl what felt like a couple of 100 meters. I don't think it was, to actually get in. And in some ways, that was actually the hardest part of the swim because my legs were so tired, but my arms were so tired. And obviously, when you crawl, you hold your weight through your arms as much as you do your legs. And where it was sand, because it wasn't solid, I couldn't just put my hand down because whereas in the waves, the sand was constantly moving. So it was really hard work. Felt like going through quicksand, basically, or what I imagine going through quicksand would be. So it was basically clawing at the sand. And it was backwards and forwards between me and Lance encouraging me and me basically shouting back swearing at him, telling him I was out of the water, and him going, no, you're not, keep going, keep going. And he really did make me crawl completely. He was like, I'm not letting people say you haven't completed this swim because you haven't quite cleared the water, keep crawling. And eventually I was out of the water and basically just collapsed in a heap on the sand and sat there for a couple of minutes looking out as the sun was rising over England, what was England, and I could see my pilot boat in the distance. And Lance, I didn't know, had radioed through to the boat that I'd landed. I didn't get told how long I'd been in the water for or anything like that. And then the next difficulty was me getting in the boat and getting back onto the main boat. So the swim didn't end at the end of the swim, if that makes sense. Yeah, it was very strange. It took probably a good 6 months to sink in what I'd actually done. And one of the weirdest and most bizarre things, so when I wasn't in the best place when I finished my swim. In my finish photo, it's awful. And it took me a couple of months before I was willing to share it because it's that bad. It doesn't look anything like me. My entire face is just swollen. I could hardly talk. Even drinking was painful. It was basically like having thousands and thousands of paper cuts on the inside of my mouth with salt water. So it was not particularly pleasant. But the issue was when we got back on the boat. So Lance asked me, and I'll never forget the question. He said, can you help me push the boat back in the water? And I was like, you're joking, mate. Like, no, I can't stand up, let alone push a boat. And he basically he helped me over to the boat and then lent me on the boat to try and use my weight to get it back in. And in the end, he just gave up and put me in the boat. And sort of did the whole bum shuffle thing that you do to try and scoot off the edge of the sand so it was deep enough so he could actually use the boat. But we arrived back at Sea Saturn and we were about halfway back, which was my pilot boat. And he basically, turned to him and I went, Lance, how on earth am I going to get back on the boat? Because to get on and off the boat, so at the back of the boat, you've got a platform that you can actually sit on or stand on. And then there's a step ladder up to the main deck of the boat. And I was like, I can't stand and walk, let alone go up a ladder. Like, what? And how am I getting out of the rib boat that I'm in? Like, I can't stand up to step over. And he was like, we'll figure something out. I was like, okay. in the end, it took everybody on board to help me get back up onto the actual deck. But the issue was where I'd gone from being flat in the water for 29 hours and 4 minutes to then being upright, I went into a bit of shock. And I also had mild hypothermia from the exposure of being in cold water for that long as well. So, sort of the first, I imagine it was probably about half an hour being back on the boat. We weren't celebrating, it was about making sure that I was actually okay. That wasn't what I'd expected or pictured in my head for after my swim. There was no celebration as such. So like when I did the relay, like we were all chatting and celebrating and sitting in the sun and having a lovely time on the way back. But for my solo, there wasn't any of that celebrating at all. The first bit was making sure I was actually all right. The first thing I did was I had a huge drink of water. I drank, I think, 3 or 4 bottles of water and promptly threw them up, but I just needed liquid. And they tried to get me up onto the seat. And I said, no, I'm staying on the floor because I can't fall off the floor, whereas I can fall off a seat. I couldn't get warm because I was still in my wet swimming costume. So it ended up being my sister and Camilla basically had to strip me to get me out of it, to stop me being quite so cold, to try and warm me up. And then I ended up bum shuffling down into like the main cabin area and sat there. And within seconds, I think I must have been asleep and slept for a couple of hours. And weirdly, after that, I was absolutely fine.
Amazing. I mean, incredible. Congratulations. But
Thank you.
you did mention, you got 3 world records. What are the 3 world records that you got?
So I got the longest one-way solo English Channel swim. The record before me was held by Jackie Coble, and I think it was more than a decade old. And she was about half an hour quicker than I was, I think. I also got the first person with complex regional pain syndrome to swim the English Channel. And then the final one was the longest ocean swim for someone with MP3 classification, which is lower muscle impairment, which is just a classification the Guinness World Records do. So it was the longest ocean swim for someone with MP3 as well. Yeah, it was all a bit bananas.
And then you got a lot of press afterwards, didn't you?
Yes, I did. We had to hide from the press. We'd had some press anyway because of that was the idea of it with the Starlight campaign and things. And locally, I'd done some press stuff, Cambridgeshire. But after the swim, it went nuts. But I refused to talk to anybody. I had been, apparently, they were actually asked on the boat, when they were on the boat, if they could talk to me during the swim. And they were like, no, she's not talking to anyone. She's swimming. But afterwards, my mum was getting phone calls. My sister had phone calls. And I was not in a fit state to do any sort of interview. I hadn't really grasped what I'd actually done. So even if I had done an interview, it would have been rubbish because I didn't realise what I'd done. So in the end, my sister, bless her, because the swim went on so much longer than it was meant to, she got about 4 hours sleep in the place we were staying and then had to go and get a train home because she had work the next day. And the first press interview, if you like, with her at Waterloo train station, and she looked awful. But I think it was we waited until I'd got back to Cambridgeshire before I spoke to any press. And me and my crew had a Zoom meeting and a chat to sort of get the facts straight, because in my head things happened in different orders to what they actually happened because it was such a long swim. And it was really interesting talking to them and hearing about things that were going on the boat that I had no idea about. So one of the things that really made me thank them even more was that at one point or another during the swim, every single person on that boat wanted to pull me out. But every single time someone said, I think we should get her out, everybody else went, no, she's fine. And if I hadn't had that, they would have pulled me out. And that would have been the end of my swim. So I was incredibly lucky with the team that I chose. I think the way that I'd looked at it was it was the right way for me to look at it. My job was to go and swim the English Channel. Their job was to get me there safely. And that's exactly what they did. So, yeah, it sort of went, it was all over the BBC News and Cambridgeshire News and all sorts of things. And I have done quite a few talking events and things since to groups of swimmers and also just to groups of people that have asked me to go and give them a talk on my swim and the resilience and the mental side of it. And I still get those requests today. Really enjoy going and doing it. And I swam at probably the biggest swim event with most swimmers that I've done a couple of weekends ago at the Cold Water Swimming Championships at Tooting Bec Lido. And it was really strange because everybody knew me. And it's still a feeling that I have to get used to. And at first, when people, because all the swimming community had heard about my swim, so I was going and swimming places. If I went on holiday down to Devon or something and went swimming, everybody would automatically know who I was. And one of the nicest swims that I had not long after the Channel swim was a swim where no one knew what I'd done. And none of them realised until after the swim who I was. And it was really nice to just go for a swim like any other swim, because I was getting so many questions and everything from everyone that I don't want to say it was exhausting, but it got frustrating for me sometimes. It wasn't until what I'd done sunk in that I then realised why they were looking at me in the way that they were. But it is still a bit bizarre to me that people know who I am.
It's phenomenal on so many different levels. 29 hours and 4 minutes, 3 world records swimming through 2 nights. Just absolutely amazing. And you were raising funds for a charity, weren't you? Do you want to share more about what your funds did and how they helped?
I raised money for the STA when I was doing it. Originally, it wasn't going to be a fundraising swim, but I was getting so many people saying, can I donate, that we decided to turn it into one. And in the end, I think I raised just over £6,000, which was incredible. I was aiming for 2. So it was, yeah, but it went towards paying for the training for the specialist teachers to become specialist disability swimming teachers. So in the end, I think there were over 1,000 teachers that were trained as part of that Starlight campaign, and the £6,000 that I raised went towards that. So I'm hoping, and I think it's made a big difference, that being able to have more disabled kids learn to swim. Since then, I've done work with Level Water, which is another great charity, and I did fundraising for last year. They teach disabled children for free. So some of the people that had done the qualification were then working with Level Water. So it's been a really nice journey to see what a difference what I've done has made. I've had hundreds of messages where it's just given people confidence to do a swim and to try open water swimming, that they've gone, well, if she can do it, why can't I? Like, she has all these issues. Why am I complaining when she's done that? Yeah, I got a message the other day from a lady where it's all come back up on Facebook in the past few weeks. And it just said, I just wanted to let you know that I swam 500 metres further than I was planning to today because of you. Because she thought of my swim and what I did, and it kept her going for another 500 metres. And it's just the small things like that that really sort of warm my heart in a way.
That's amazing. And that, to be honest, this is what it is all about. It's about getting out there, doing these challenges, doing these adventures, inspiring other people to push themselves and to try new things. You are active on social media. How can people connect with you, find out more information about you and your incredible swims? Where should they go?
So on Facebook, I'm Sophie Etheridge, adaptive athlete. And I also use Instagram. They're the only 2 social medias that I use. And my social media for Instagram is Sophie_adaptive_athlete. So yeah, you can follow my journey and my training sessions and things that I'm up to on both of them. Yeah, I've also got a website and a blog on it, which is Sophie-adaptive-athlete.com. And on the blog, there is also a blog about my entire channel swim. So it's in 4 parts, but you can read it all through as well. And it keeps people up to date on what I'm doing in terms of coaching and things as well.
Fantastic. And Sophie, I'd love for you to have the final words of advice, final words of wisdom for other women out there who want to take on a challenge which is outside of their comfort zone. Want to, go into that unknown. They want to push themselves. Apart from just do it, what advice would you like to share?
I think if there's something that you want to do but you're unsure about, find out where you need to start to be able to learn to how you can do what you would like to do, and just go for it. Give yourself that permission to almost let go and just try it, because if you don't try it, you're never going to know, and you never know where that journey of doing this new thing is going to take you, because I could never have dreamed that my swim would take me to where it has. It's totally transformed my life. So you just got to take the opportunities that you're given when you're given them.
Take those opportunities. Absolutely amazing. Sophie, it's been incredible to catch up with you. Massive congratulations on such a phenomenal achievement and on your world records, and for being such an inspiration to so many people out there and such an incredible role model for following your passions and for your interests, and just helping to encourage more people to swim. So thank you so much for coming back and speaking with us.
Thank you for having me again.
Hey, tribe. How are you all doing? I hope you're all doing super well. Big shout out to all the swimmers out there who are training for their next swim, or whether you're just going wild swimming or a dip in the ocean, or you're doing a triathlon and getting out there, doing laps in the pool, doing the distances, doing what you need to get done. Very proud of each and every one of you. But how great was it to catch up with Sophie and just hear all about her channel swim crossing? Like, just incredibly inspiring, and what a phenomenal achievement. So we have spoken to Sophie before. Her episode is on the Tough Girl podcast, so please do go back and listen to our first episode where we get to learn more about Sophie's early years. I've also spoken to a lot of other swimmers as well. So if you go and visit toughgirlchallenges.com, there is a resources section, and if you scroll about 10 down, there is a page dedicated to swimmers. So we've spoken to wild swimmers. We've spoken with Sophie Pierce, who shares more about a journey of grief, love, and wild swimming. We've spoken to Sarah Thomas, who's an ultra marathon swimmer, breast cancer survivor, and the first person to complete a 4-way crossing of the English Channel in 54 hours and 10 minutes. We've spoken with Jill Castle, who's also known as Stoma Chameleon. She did a solo channel swim in 2023. Sharing more about her journey there. We've had Omi Dale on, who's a keen outdoor swimmer and coach who loves getting people swimming outdoors for the first time. Sophie Ruffles, Jessica Hepburn, Kelly Smith, Claire Rutter. There's so many names. Winnie Potey. Oh, lovely Winnie. She shares more about being a Congolese open water swimmer and mental health awareness. And we've got Alice Deering as well, who a British marathon swimmer, world and European junior champion, a co-founder of Black Swimming Association as well. So many incredible women out there doing these amazing epic challenges. Lindsay Cole, she adventuring with ADHD, swimming the length of the River Thames as a mermaid and swimming with strangers. So if you are passionate about swimming and want to learn more about it, pick up different top tips and advice, and please do go and give it a listen. Beth French has been on Tough Girl podcast twice. Really inspiring to listen to her story as well. Lisa Williams, who's also swam the English Channel as well. Now, even if you're thinking, do you know what, Sarah, but I'm not going to swim the English Channel, that's okay. You can still learn a lot from other women sharing their stories. How did they train? How did they prepare mentally? What were the obstacles that they had to overcome? You'll always be able to pick up one piece of knowledge that you'll be able to apply for your life. Remember, everybody's different. Everyone's got different challenges in different situations, and it's about doing what works for you. What can you do? Not what can other people do, not what other people expect you to do. It's what works for you. So I hope you are getting after your goals. You are chasing them down. You're being committed. You're putting in the work day after day after day, because that is what it is about, showing up every single day. To learn more about me and what I do, then please visit toughgirlchallenges.com. You can find more information about me, the different adventures and challenges that I've done, but more importantly, the incredible women who've been sharing their story on the Tough Girl podcast since 2015. We are over 760 odd episodes now, which is just absolutely amazing. And we are going to, hopefully, fingers crossed, if I can do all the work, which I will, because I'm committed and I'll make it happen. We should be hitting 800 episodes on the 4th of August this year, 2025, which will be the 10th year anniversary of the Tough Girl podcast. So that's what I'm working towards. I just want this massive library, this massive catalogue of women sharing their adventure stories, whether it's ocean rowing, climbing mountains, running, ultra running, through hiking, triathlons, traveling the world, sailing. You get the gist. Thank you so much for listening. Please do tell one friend about the Tough Girl podcast. It makes a massive difference. If you're in a financially stable position at the moment and you enjoy listening to the Tough Girl podcast, I would love for you to pay it forward and sign up as a patron. If you can visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast, and you can sign up monthly or annually, or you can just do a one-off donation via PayPal. It all helps. It all helps to cover those costs of running a website and hosting a podcast. All that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.